A few weeks ago, I had to give a really quick and easy demonstration on the technique for making ravioli, and I had to come up with a quick filling. So I just simply minced up some cooked chicken breast, flavored it with some pesto, made the ravioli. It was so good. I decided right then and there, I have to do a whole video on chicken pesto ravioli. What I'm actually going to do to finish it is I'm going to make an Alfredo sauce to put over the top. Now I'm starting the evening before because I want to make my pasta dough this evening. Pasta dough is easier to work with if you let it sit for several hours, or better yet overnight. So I'm going to make my pasta dough this evening, wrap it, put it in the refrigerator, and tomorrow I'm going to make my ravioli and my Alfredo sauce. So let's make pasta dough. For my pasta dough, I'm going to be using two different kinds of flour. This is pasta flour, or durum wheat semolina. I'm going to be using half that and then half of my all-purpose flour. My first step here is to get a couple of eggs in here. These are large eggs. And then I want to put in a pinch of salt. You salt fresh pasta dough because it's not going to absorb any salt from the water when you cook it. So you don't cook it in salted water. It only cooks in about a minute or two. So you put salt in the dough. And then I'm just going to put in maybe a tablespoon, no, not even that. Just a little bit of extra virgin olive oil. That'll give me a little bit of a creamier, smoother texture to the dough. So 2 large eggs, pinch of salt, and maybe a tablespoon of extra virgin olive oil. Now that's all mixed up. I have here roughly half a cup each of my 2 flours. I know for each egg I'm going to need about half a cup of flour. I'm going to put in most of this because I know it's going to pretty much all go in, and I may even have to add some more. The thing with how much flour to use, and I didn't give you any weight on those, it all depends on how big the eggs are. In different countries, a medium egg is a different size than a medium egg in another country. So I always start off with less flour than I know I'm going to need. That's just about starting to form a dough now. So now this is when I start returning to the flour in my jars. And I'm going to be working in this flour a little bit at a time until I end up with a dough that is dry enough to knead. So this is going to take me a minute or two. I took that fork out. I'm just using my hand now to force this together. And as you can see there, I'm getting a dough. So I'm going to move that to my counter. I'm going to move these away. I'm pretty much done with those. And now it's just a matter of kneading. I may have to add a little bit more flour. But this is pretty much where I need it to be as far as a nice pasta dough. Okay, so I've been kneading this dough here for less than a minute. What I'm looking for is a dough that's smooth and pliable, not too dry but not too sticky. A nice workable dough that I can work through my pasta machine. Beautifully smooth. All right, I'm going to wrap this up, put this in the refrigerator overnight, and then tomorrow I'll start turning this dough into ravioli. So here we are, day 2. I took my pasta dough out of the refrigerator. I'm letting this come up to room temperature. In the meantime, I need to make my pesto, and I'm going to make a lot of it because I want to experiment with it. I'm actually going to freeze some. I already have recipes on my website. There are links to videos that I've done, so I don't need to give you the long story on how to make pesto. I will say that pesto is an Italian word for pounded, and how it's typically made is in a mortar with a pestle, and you pound the leaves down, grind them up. That's what releases the juices from the leaves. You have to break those leaves down. I have a lot of basil here that I bought yesterday, and I've been keeping it in water to keep it fresh. How I do mine is I put the leaves, the garlic, I'm going to be using roasted pecans because I like those better than pine nuts. I'm going to put all that in a Ziploc bag and pound it down with a mallet. Then I put it in a food processor to finish the blending. So I'm going to go do that first, and then I'll come back and finish up making my pesto. So I have my food processor set up now, but first I want to show you this. This is my pounded basil. You're not going to see running water in there. It's not going to be really liquidy, but by bruising that basil really well, that's what releases the juices. It's going to give my pesto its flavor. Now I have to transfer all of this into my food processor. That's going to take a minute or so, and then I can start blending my pesto. So I have all my crushed basil in there. I'm going to put my Romano cheese in there. I'm using Romano rather than Parmesan, and I'm not giving you proportions as far as volumes because, as I said, I'm going to make more than I need, and I already have videos and recipes for making pesto. I don't want to waste your time with things you might have already seen. So I put a good pinch of salt in there. I'm going to grind some black pepper into there. And then finally, this is extra virgin olive oil. I'm going to put some of that in there. I tend to make my pesto a little on the dry side, especially for today because I'm going to be making ravioli with it, and I don't want a really oily pesto inside my ravioli. As I always do, I'll put a piece of plastic on there. This protects my lid because it's got places where stuff can get up inside, then it's difficult to clean. And then I just want to blend this up. Okay, that's looking better. Get out my infamous red-handled tasting spoon. Drop some pesto in there. You can see how dry that is. And taste that. Pesto always surprises me. How can anything taste that delicious? Okay, I'm going to add a little bit more oil to this, and that'll finish up my pesto when I can start working on making my raviolis. The next thing I want to do is chop up some chicken. I have chicken breast here, cooked chicken breast left over. I only need about maybe 2 ounces, a small amount. And I want to just chop this up kind of small. What is 2 ounces? About 57 grams. This is going to go inside of ravioli, so I do want to reduce this down fairly well so that I don't have big chunks. Then put that in a bowl. All right, then I can start mixing in my pesto to flavor this. All right, so now I'm ready to mix some of my pesto into my chicken. I don't need much, maybe like a tablespoon or 2. And that right there might be enough. All right, red-handled tasting spoon. That could use a pinch of salt. One more taste. Yes, that's perfect. Okay, there's the filling for my ravioli. So as you can see, I have my pasta machine set up. I'm going to work with maybe a third of this piece of dough at a time. We'll wrap this up and set it aside. I have my flour duster out because I'm probably going to need that. This is a little bit moist. As I shape this, I may need to work some flour into it. I don't need a really stiff dough. I'm making a ravioli, not a spaghetti, so therefore I'm not as concerned about it being al dente. But I am going to lightly flour that before I put it through my machine. All right. And I'm going to roll this down to, on my wheel, number 5 on the setting. And that should give me a nice long piece of dough. So I put a pasta sheet down. This is part of my pasta. It was so long I cut off a piece of it. And then I've got my filling here, and I'm just going to put little mounds of filling on my dough. Okay. So there's my filling on there. And now I have some, I made an egg white wash by mixing some egg white with some water. I'm going to brush down the middle, but I'm going to leave one edge uncovered here. And that'll become understandable in a moment. I want to fold this over, and by not brushing that last edge, it's not going to stick on this side just yet, which allows me a vent area where I can squeeze out some air. Okay, now I want to get underneath there with this and brush along that final edge as I've got the air out, and then squeeze that down, pinching out any last bit of air. I don't want a lot of air in my raviolis because I don't want them to puff up. I messed up a little bit down on this end, but it'll look more homemade, right? Then I want to just trim off this one long edge first. Okay, good. Trim off this edge. I'm using a fluted cutter to do this. You can use a knife if you want. I think a fluted cutter gives me more of that ravioli look than just cutting in between with the cutter. And there they are, my raviolis. I'm heating a small saucepan on the stove here. This is my ceramic saucepan. I put in there about 3/4 of an ounce of flour, and that's about 3/4 of an ounce of butter. I don't know what the butter is volumetrically, but the flour is about 2.5 maybe tablespoons. And this is called making a roux. And all I want to do here is just cook this for less than a minute. By cooking this, what I'm doing is I'm cooking the raw flavor out of that flour. All right. And now to this, I'm going to add 1 cup of milk, or a half and half. That's just shy of 250 milliliters. I believe it's like 247 or something like that, 246 milliliters. I'm going to raise my heat here a little bit, and I'm going to bring this to a boil, and my roux will thicken that milk, or as I said, half and half. This is a white sauce, and by itself, it's nothing. It's just a plain, simple, thickened milk but this is what they call a mother sauce. From this, you can create all kinds of sauces. Now, this is just starting to thicken. Look at that. Nice thick sauce. See it coming to the boil there? I'm going to take the heat off because this next step I want to do off heat. So that's going to need to be watered down just a little bit, but maybe no more than like a teaspoon of milk. But how do we turn this into an Alfredo sauce? I mentioned doing this off heat because I don't want my cheese to be too stringy. I have here, if I remember correctly, about an ounce of grated cheese. That's Romano, shredded cheese. And then, because I know I'm going to need some color, I'm going to put a pinch of freshly chopped parsley in there and a good pinch of salt. Maybe not a good pinch. I changed my mind halfway through because that Romano cheese has a lot of salt in it. And I added the parsley because what I want is some color here rather than just a plain white sauce. I don't want to put a plain white sauce on plain white ravioli. I have in the meantime heated some water up to a boil. And I'm going to put my ravioli in there. I have two different sizes here, you will see. And because this is fresh pasta, it doesn't have to cook for very long. Like a minute and a half is all that's required. So there is my plate of chicken pesto ravioli. I'm going to put some sauce over the top. I don't need to put any cheese on this, obviously, because there's cheese in the sauce. Clean this plate up a little bit. For some presentation. If you wanted to, you could sprinkle a little extra parsley on top. But there it is. That is ready to taste. Let's see how good this tastes. Okay, let's see what my chicken pesto ravioli tastes like. Wow. This has a nice surprise to it because at first you taste the pasta and the Alfredo sauce. But then as you bite into the ravioli, the chicken and the pesto comes out, so you get a second burst of flavor. This is really, really delicious. So it's a little late for lunch, but excuse me, I'm going to go enjoy my lunch. For a printable PDF copy of this recipe with step-by-step photographs, visit my website, mobilehomegourmet.com, and look on the home page or in the recipe archive.